Hello, everybody, and good morning. Welcome to the second day of our ninth EPALE Community Conference. Yesterday, we broadcast live from the beautiful Sala Borsa Library in central Bologna, and our theme was everything digital. We talked about the radical history of adult learning and how it was linked to individual empowerment and social movements. We talked about the ethics of AI and the risks that AI now begins to eat itself as it consumes content that it generated itself. We also talked about how to place technology and AI within a context of human skills, human intelligence linked skills, like how to analyze and organize information, how to learn, and how to use critical thinking to see what's behind the information and to position that information in our own learning conceptual framework. Today, our theme, we're tackling poverty and social exclusion. These are big challenges in Europe, which is still coping with the poly crisis of the cost of living shocks, recovery from the pandemic. We have war on our eastern and southern borders. So there's a lot of big things to deal with. And that's not even mentioning climate change. Of course, you're familiar within the EPALE community about the important role that adult learning can play to enhance employability and to promote social inclusion. That's what we already know. But today we're going to be opening a really fascinating set of conversations because we're going to talk on a little bit on the soft skills, the transversal skills, and particularly we're focusing in on creativity. How does creativity make learning easier, more powerful, more impactful? And I'm very excited that we've got our keynote speaker today who's going to be talking about time. Now, if you're like me and your life feels really busy and you're constantly under the tyranny of time pressure, you will appreciate our conversation because he's going to help us rethink about the concept of time. And within that, that will give us the space and the capacity to think about new narratives, to reflect on the past, and to envision a new future. So it's going to be a really exciting session. And we also have some amazing creative experts who are going to help us rethink what's a book club if you don't actually read the book. How does the disciplines from theatre and from circuses help us to make learning a better experience? So we've got a fantastic agenda for you today, and I know you're going to enjoy it just as much as yesterday. Now, you make the conference. And yesterday we had really great input, lots of comments and questions that came in from the audience. And we're going to rely on you to do the same thing today. So, of course, if you're watching us on the different social media platforms or on the EPALE platform itself, please submit your questions, your comments, because I'll be bringing that in to our conversation with our experts. And we really like to hear from you. I would also want to plug for you the EPALE. Um, we've got a mobile app. So you can download it on your phone and you can take a Parley with you at any time. You can see the QR code on there. That's to download the app. And that gives you access to that vibrant community of more than 150,000 people across Europe and the world who are sharing ideas, sharing their problems, their challenges, their inspirations. So you can take the Apale platform on your phone with you wherever and whenever. So there's the app, and it's certainly one of the most interactive and easiest ways to engage with us. So that's what we've got on the agenda today. I'm really looking forward to you being active. And what I'd like us to do is to start the day. And yesterday, I told you a big shout out to 14 national support services across Europe who are organizing side events connected to this conference. And we love that because it brings together local communities in their local language, as well as linking into the big themes that we're putting together. And so throughout the community conference, we're doing live link ups, different ones. And today we're going to be linking up to colleagues in Croatia. So let me say hello to Tia Dominkovic in Zagreb. Hello, Tia. How are you? I don't think your
je
microphone's
postavljen da ustanove doista rade ono za što su pokazale
hello.
svoj interes kroz bilo izradu novih programa i rješenja za njihovo.
Tia, I think we connected to them perhaps a little early, and they was giving an introduction in Croatian. So let's wait a second until we can get through to them and let them know. But that's a sign that something's happening over there, and we're excited to see. And I hope it's sunnier than I'm sitting here in Brussels at the moment. It's a bit grey and cloudy. And yesterday in Bologna was absolutely beautiful. Enjoyed it. And a big shout out not only to our colleagues in Bologna who hosted us, but to the wonderful ice cream of Italy, which I've very much enjoyed. Um, Eating and testing. So we're going to be going to TIA in Croatia in a few moments. And one of the things about the NSS organizing their events is we need to make sure that um, the EPALE Community Conference is not just an online space. It is a way of engaging and bringing local communities together. So they take the big themes we might talk about and they might explore what does that mean in our context? How could we apply this new learning? What's the next message we could take forward? So we're going to be hearing a little bit about what we're hearing from Zagreb. So let's try to see if we can connect up again with Tia. Hello, connections into Zagreb. Okay. Apologies, we're still not managing to get through to that. So we'll come back to them later after our first keynote speaker. Now, I promised you that we were going to talk about time. And when I thought about it, I thought of all the different ways that I think about time in language. So deadlines, we're out of time, running out of time. Time is counting against us, or it's election time, or it's holiday time, it's work time. So when I thought about all the words and concepts around time, it felt like a lot of them were very heavy and felt oppressive. And just to give you a funny anecdote, yesterday when I was in Italy and we were about to start the meeting, I turned to the Italian colleagues and I said, "Okay, are we going to start bang on 9:30? Is it Italian time?" And I was told, "No, it's Swiss time. We will start on time." So we even associate time with different characteristics. And we have this sense that free time is somehow relaxed and lovely, and work time or travel time is a very pressurized thing. And yet, time itself is a neutral concept, but we have all this emotional baggage around it. So, to help us understand that, I'm delighted to introduce our keynote speaker. So, the topic is It's All About Time. And welcome to Michelle Aladev Jones, who's a psychologist and a philosopher who specializes in adult education. He's the executive director of the San Jonas Institute, which is based in Switzerland. And he focuses on life history and how adults experience time in their everyday lives. And as a busy, mum to two kids and working, I can tell you my experience of time is very compressed. Every minute is accounted for. He's the author of a book called Time and the Rhythms of Emancipatory Education. And he's the co-founder of the Esria Stream Network. So welcome, Michelle. So it really is all about time. So much of our life is prescribed by a rigid time frame, often dictated by forces outside our own control, like working time or deadlines. And our experience of time is not objective, it's highly subjective. But that experience is rarely liberating. We rarely feel like it is freeing us up. It feels that it compresses us, and that's part of the language that we use. Now, you have described very elegantly this concept of temporal alienation. Why is time such a challenge for us?
Well, good morning, Tamsin. Good morning, everyone. Very happy to be with you today. Well, I think the experience of time is really at the core of most of the challenges we encounter. So if you consider, for instance, the technological innovations we are facing, we are outpaced by the speed of development of new technologies. So it seems that we don't have time to process the effects and the evolution. The same if you think about environmental transition, that's something very preoccupying us today. We know we have to move faster, but we are often stuck between conflicting agendas, more or less conservative or progressive. So change itself takes time. So the experience of time, I think it's absolutely crucial. I think it expresses a lot of the way we experience tension and also power dynamics in our life. And so if I think about the theme of today's conference and social inequalities, I mean, time is also at the core of how poverty and vulnerability is experienced. So for many, being confronted with the scarcity of resources makes it difficult to project ourselves in the future, and survival strategies are omnipresent. They make people in situation of vulnerability feel stuck in an ongoing present made of the repetition of the same alienating reality, made of the same patterns, disconnected from their past and their future. So thinking about time is really crucial in order to reflect on how we can extract ourselves from pressures, tensions, and form of alienations that are dominating everyday life. I don't hear you.
Sorry, yes. Thank you. I'm sure many people would recognize what you're talking about, this sense of alienation. And I was earlier this year in May, I was on a stand for DG Employment talking to the general public during the European Open Days. And I was supposed to be talking to people about whether they'd taken up education and skills opportunities. And person after person who came by, I said, "Oh, have you thought about this?" And almost every single one said, "I don't have time. Even if I wanted to do it, I just don't have time." So if that's what learners or potential learners are experiencing, what does this mean for the educators? What do they need to understand about the temporal reality of the learners who are in front of them?
Well, I think for educators, it's critical to recognize different form of temporal alienations, and understood as temporal tensions that prevent people from developing themselves individually or collectively. So, for example, one form of temporal alienation has to do with being confronted with an ongoing feeling of acceleration. For instance, having to do always more and more in less time. That's for me was part of my experience working in higher education and being confronted to conflicting agendas between the schedules of the institution and what I thought needed to be done and happen in the classroom. So there's this feeling of you having to be able to compress. So I think it's important to be able to reflect on that, to reflect on the context in which we exercise what we are doing, and think about what's the role that times and especially temporal tensions play in that context. So we are often caught in between conflicting temporalities that appear as irreconcilable. So in people's life, it can have to do with the tension between the rhythms of one's work environment and those of the rhythm of family's life, for example. I mean, you were mentioning your kids earlier. That's the same for me. I mean, we have to balance those different rhythms in our life. And in everyday's activity for educator, I think the risk is the difficulty is to assert the rhythms of learning, the rhythms that are require, the time that is required for people to learn, to dialogue, to critically reflect on their experience. All that takes time. And the problem is that often institutions impose on us temporalities that are conflicting with that. So we need to be able to take distance and reflect on those tensions.
Thank you. I mean, that's so key, is just to have the time to breathe and reflect and plan and move forward. And as you say, so much of our life seems to be by deadlines and time that can't be moved. I have to get my kids to school by a certain time. This has to be done for a work deadline and another. So our sense is very much that it's compressed. So when we think about intelligence, we've all heard that we've got emotional intelligence. So we understand there's that kind of soft human contact as well as the hard IQ. You are proposing that we also need to add another element, which is rhythmic intelligence. Can you tell us more about that concept, and what would that mean?
Yeah. Well, when we think about the way people experiencing time, to be emancipated means to be able to break through temporal pressures and temporal tensions. It also means being able to envision critically how changes and transformations could occur through time in a way that is truly empowering. So for me, rhythmic intelligence refers to that capacity that people have to reflect on how changes and transformation occur through time. And so I believe it requires people to be able to negotiate different visions of the future, for example, and understand how such visions may unfold through time. For example, today we talk about sustaining, sustainable development. Well, what does it mean to sustain a constant effort that involves change and transformation through time? We need to envision where we are going and how we get there. So to do that, people need to be able to extract themselves from the present, to reconnect with their past, to identify resources within themselves, and to reconnect with their future self. And in order to build projects they can invest in, they also have to find ways to break with the patterns of activities that makes them feel stuck and embrace specific rhythm of life. I think it's what's critical also with rhythmic intelligence is being able to identify the rhythms that empower you. There are rhythms in what we do, in the activities we have, in the way we interact with people, in the way we take care of people. And so those rhythms need to be sustained. Sometimes they need to be protected from other rhythms, other constraints. And so rhythmic intelligence has to do with this capacity to identify the rhythms that matter to us, that count, that are important for what we're doing, including in the classroom, for example, and reflect on how we can sustain such rhythms in a way that is truly sustainable.
Wow, I was really struck by what you just said because, in the area of climate change, one of our big challenges of responding to that, and I know we're going to talk about that tomorrow on our sustainability day, is that climate change is kind of happening so slowly, it's hard for us to see it, and therefore, because it's we're told it's urgent, but we don't experience it, and so we're unable to have that kind of long-term thinking that requires us to take action now for something that's going to happen. So that mismatch between the natural rhythms of time around us and the time we exist in when we make daily decisions, I think that's a really interesting concept, and I like the idea that we need to be able to extract ourselves from the tyranny of the clock, tick tock, tick tock, to be able to think, look backwards, move forwards, and planning. And I think also maybe we could just speak a little bit more about why that's so important for people who are marginalized, living in poverty, we know that that creates a sort of limit in their choices and what they do. And we're used to thinking about that as limits to, say, their financial capacity to do it, but you're this importance of, if you're surviving day to day and you don't know if you've got enough money at the end of the month to buy shoes for your kids, heat your home, or pay for food, where's your spare time to plan for something different? So you're adding that contextual layer of time pressure for people on the margins. um, if you are an injecting drug user or someone with an addiction, you time till your next fix, time till you can get it again. So in many ways, that experience of time is really hard for people in precarious situations. Can you just help us understand how that time pressure affects them?
Well, what you say is exactly that. I think that one expression of temporal alienation uh, can appear through the fact that we are, some people and all of us to some extent sometimes experience being stuck in the present, in this kind of ever repeating loop that we're experiencing because we are caught into activities that force us to, whether it's work related or just finding basic way to subsist and maintain the basic lifeline, if you want. And so alienation has to do with this feeling of being stuck. So feeling emancipated means being able to extract ourselves for this repetitive loop into which we can be feeling locked in a way. And so I think that one major challenge, and it's a paradox because it requires time actually to be able to stop, reflect, and consider the existence within which we are evolving. But that's really what is at stake. It's really being able to find a way to extract ourselves and to be able to consider how the present situation relates to the past, where we come from, where we can find resources, and the future, where we are envisioning ourselves. And so being able to extract ourselves from, in a way, routines and everyday habits that kind of lock ourselves is really critical. And I think that could be also the role of education and adult education, to provide people with a safe, protected space to extract themselves from the tyranny of the present, to say it in another way.
Thank you. And we're keeping an eye across all the social media platforms where we're broadcasting that. And in a little bit, I'll be opening up for questions. So please send your questions and your comments. We'd love to hear your experience of time and how you, in the adult education space, can try and liberate people from that tyranny of time. And Michelle, it was really interesting. Again, I'm struck by this word alienation, that we are alienated from the things that we value, and therefore it feels like we never have the time to do the things that we care about, to provide quality time with our family or in leisure and hobbies. And we know how important, time in green spaces is to mental health. It's measurable, and yet these are some of the things that get knocked off when we're under the time pressure to get stuff done. So let's see if we can be quite practical now. We have this amazing community of adult educators who are planning curriculum and ideas and developing outreach. So what could they do to help liberate people from time pressure? Is there a magic wand that you could wave to make time stand still?
Well, I wish I had it, actually, but no, I don't have any magical recipe, obviously. But I think what's crucial is the first step maybe is to become or to be more conscious of the way we experience time. And the fact that I think what's absolutely critical is to be aware that the experience of time always express power dynamics. So we need to develop strategies to help learners, educators, but also policymakers being able to critically reflect on the values of time beyond the time is money thing. So concretely, I think it is crucial to provide educators with spaces of deceleration that are spaces where it is valorized to slow down and take the time for introspection, self-reflection, and deep dialogue with others. I mean, we know that dialogue is at the core of what we do in adult education, but we are always missing so much the opportunity and the time to really unfold quality discussion with each other. So I think that's obviously crucial. I think it's also because it's easy to say that, but practically speaking, it's always a challenge. So I think it's also crucial to provide spaces to negotiate conflicting temporal demands and question how deadlines and schedules express conflicts of interest or conflicts of values among the people and the institutions that are involved. So, for example, one of the challenges I have in my practice is that often being constrained by the academic schedules or institutional temporal constraint, we don't have necessarily time to really go in the depth of what would deserve to be done with the learners. And so I think it's important to make one step on the side and invite people in the room to reflect on, okay, what does it mean that right now we don't have time for that? What does it express? Okay, there are temporal pressure. Can we challenge some of those pressure? Can we resist a bit against them? So I think it's really about taking one step on the side and trying to assess what's going on right now in the current setting I'm in that prevents me to really have the time to do what I think quality work would require. And so obviously it's not simple, it's not easy. I think there is learning involved in being able to do that, but it's absolutely crucial. It's, I think, a survival strategy in order to really confront, because it's not just an individual thing, the temporal tensions that we're experiencing are obviously imposed on us by institutions, the institution we are living in, the institution that also allow us to connect with each other. So temporal tensions are inherent to social life, but we need to be able to question what are those temporal tensions or pressures that are legitimate and what are those that are maybe less legitimate in order to eventually challenge them. And I think emancipating others mean also, or bringing people to emancipate themselves is also about emancipating ourselves from those situations.
Just listening to you, I can feel myself breathing more calmly and feeling this idea of being liberating from pressures. It's time pressures. It's so wonderful, and this idea of spaces of deceleration. And I'm wondering if some of this is linked to the practice of mindfulness, because in mindfulness, what we try to do is be right there in the moment and not allow all the things. Oh, I've got to do this and I've forgotten to do that. It's to be right there in that moment. And is that so? Some of the practices from mindfulness, are they the things that adult educators could use to try and create these spaces of deceleration?
I think mindfulness is definitely part of it, because mindfulness is a way to reconnect with your inner rhythms, which probably is the first step. Being able to be in touch with ourselves, be in touch with um, the basic rhythms of our body, the sleep, our eating habits, and so on, the capacity to rest. So yes, definitely mindfulness has to do with that. But I think it's only the first step, because the tension, and when we talk about alienation, it's obviously something that goes beyond individuals. It's systemic. It relates to the institution in which we are living and evolve and work. And so I think that the capacity to also be in touch in a way with the rhythm of the institutions through which we interact, or through which we work and live, is also important. So beyond individual rhythms, then there is also this awareness of what are the rhythms of the institution I'm working with, for example. And so obviously it's schedules, the agenda, those things that we are very aware of to some extent. But I think the question is, how can we relate to those rhythms in a way where we can get in sync in a peaceful way, in a way, in a way that is pacified and not necessarily conflicting. Now, again, that being said, it's easy to say that, but we are often feeling crushed by the rhythm and the temporalities imposed on us by the institution. So that's why, again, I think that education and adult education has to do with protecting spaces to allow for that, to allow for being able to reflect on that, and just being more aware of those tensions and how they shape what we can do or what we feel we cannot do.
Okay, great. So we've got suggestions for the adult educators, which is to push back against the pressures, of illegitimate temporal restrictions, so that we can create this protected spaces of deceleration. If we can start to do all of this, what's the impact for the learner? How would that transform their experience of adult learning, and then the impact on their own lives?
Well, in my work, I have to say I put at the core of the work I'm doing with adult learner their life experience. And so for me, the setting I'm working with is an opportunity to bring people to reflect on their life experience, to share life experiences through, for example, life narrative, life histories that they can share orally or even in written, and see also, because I think what is crucial is also not being locked into our own very own experience, but being able to confront it also with the way other people experience maybe similar tension, and see that we are often using different strategies actually to resist and to assert ourselves. So working with life experience, with life history, is a way that brings actually participants to also identify emotional, cognitive, social, cultural resources that they already have, but that they might not necessarily be aware of at a specific time, in order to reconnect with them. And I think it's also what's particularly precious, I think, for learners, is this possibility, this opportunity to reflect on how they have changed over their life, through their life. And that connects with what I was mentioning about rhythmic intelligence, being more aware of how transformation occur throughout our lives. I think that's a key benefit of being able to extract ourselves from the tyranny of the present, to bring people to question how significant changes occur in life, because those changes, they don't follow the tick-tack of the clock, they don't follow the regularity of the calendar. They follow other forms of temporalities that are our own, that are the temporalities that constitute the very specific particularity of our own life. And I think bringing people to be able to reconnect with what is the specificity of how we change and evolve in our life is a very empowering strategy to be able to face to the present and also envision the future in a way that is really fed and nourished by the resources we already have, because in our adult life we are facing so many situations. And I think it's really critical to benefit from the experience we can capitalize on in our I'm talking here about informal learning, informal situation within family, social life, not just at work, also obviously at work, but in every setting of every aspect of our life, and try to see how we can capitalize on those experiences, reflect on them, benefit from each other's experience, and see how other people interpret, give meaning to those experiences, to again revisit them, interpret them in ways that open up possibilities to relate to the present situation in new way, in more resourceful way. And I think that's one benefit that can happen when we let time for adults to reflect on their life experiences, to really identify resources they have that they can use to envision what's going to be the next step in their own development as a human beings.
Great, thank you. Now we're starting to get some questions and input in from our audience. So let me start to share with some of the reflections. We've got a question that says, how does the concept of time perception vary across different cultures, and what can we learn from these diverse perspectives? And I'm just adding to that myself, thinking about the Aborigine community from Australia have this absolutely wonderful concept of the dream time, that this is they have a very different sense of time. So and the second question that you might want to think about is, how does the necessity of slowing down relate to the acceleration that's brought by technological challenges? So, how it seems like we're always being forced to speed up, but we've got to find ways of slowing down. So maybe you want to respond to those two. First, how do different cultures see time, and is there anything we can learn from that? And how do we manage that tension between being pushed by technological change, and we talked a lot about that yesterday, and the need to slow down?
Yeah. Well, anthropologists have been working hard on trying to map and identify how in different cultures we relate in different ways to this concept of time and the experience of time. So obviously, traveling actually is a great way to confront ourselves to environment where time is experienced in different way. Environment, I mean social and cultural environment where time is experienced in different way. And so it's very interesting to see often when people share their life history, the role that play traveling or migrating, experiencing different cultures, because in a way there is nothing best to become more aware of how we experience time than to confront ourselves to the otherness of how other people experience time. And so maybe nowadays it's a bit more challenging because, especially in Western cultures, there is a conception of time that is really dominant across countries and continents, and there is some form of hegemony in a way of specific conception of time. But I think that just moving from one city to another sometimes is enough to just realize that the rhythms people experience are very different. And so I think it's a very strong source of learning about ourselves and what characterizes the way we relate to time by observing how other people experience time. So that's one thing. And also maybe what I can add also, there is the cultural difference also relates not just to the everyday experience of time, but also in the way we connect with past and future. So I'm involved right now in a research project that has to do with the temporalities of the environmental transitions. And so the cultural dimension is really crucial. How in different cultures we envision how we relate to the future. In some cultures, there's this idea of 7 generations. You have to nurture, take care of what you have today so that it can be passed over 7 generations. That's something that is very, very strong as a statement, I think. So yeah, enriching yourself from the difference in the way people relate to time, the way they relate to past, present, and future, those things are absolutely crucial, and they are very strong opportunities for learning. Now, regarding the second question about this tension between the need to slow down and the expectation to cope with ongoing, accelerating technological change, there is clearly a paradox here, and it's probably both are related. It's because we are facing this ongoing fluxes of changes in the technologies we are using that we also kind of hope for and look for time for deceleration and slow down. The slow movement, it's a movement that has been there for quite a while. I mean, it started in the early 1980s. And so there is a whole tradition and culture of slowness that is also related to political movement, actually. And so I think it's not new, and I would like to add that in a way, I think slowness should not be necessarily celebrated as the ideal that we have to look for, because in many contexts we can be happy and privileged that we can do things fast. So when I travel from Switzerland to Paris, I'm happy I can take the train and in 3 hours I'm in Paris. So speed has also value. So I think it's more about the capacity to identify what is the right tempo, what is the right pace, what is the right rhythm in a given situation. When I spend time with my kids, I'm happy to be able to slow down. When I'm doing some administrative tasks that I don't enjoy doing, I'm happy that technology can help me doing it faster. So I think, and that's really referred to this idea of rhythmic intelligence, the idea of identifying in which situation, in which context, what rhythm is relevant, is appropriate, is desirable. And I think it's really that capacity that is crucial, rather than saying I need to do everything slow or I need to accelerate everything.
Thank you. That again, that's really useful for us to not categorize time. Everything quick is bad, everything slow is good, but it's actually the related to the values and how that's used. We've had a comment in from somebody who said, "Look, when you've got a 4-day work week, or you have the flexibility in your work to manage your 32 or 35 work hours, and a choice about how you do this, and that's granted to more and more workers." This actually helps to make it positive and inclusive across all society if that capacity for flexibility is offered. So this is a comment to what you were saying about how much locus of control we have over our time. um, but we've got a question, how might we design educational or community programs that enhance people's ability to envision their future more critically and constructively? So you mentioned, create protected spaces as spaces for deceleration, but again, practical suggestions for educators. How do you
Yeah.
create a program that would allow people to plan their future and imagine something constructive?
Yeah. Well, I think, I mean, if we start from the assumptions that reflecting on the future takes time, and connecting our representation of where we want to be, where in connection where we are or where we used to be, that takes time. I think the very first step is often a step of uh, protecting the space and resisting. So I'm going to give you a very quick example. I'm implementing right now at the University of Geneva a 3-day workshop where people who are registered in continuing education can come and share life experience in order to better understand how they relate to learning and what does it mean for them to learn as adult and going back to university, or going even for the first time to university. And so it's a 3-day workshop, and we purposefully design it in a way where it takes 3 full days for people to be able to really share in-depth experience in a small group. And so one of my colleagues was, as we were presenting the program, she was saying, yeah, okay, but I mean, people are busy finding time to do that. It's very challenging. Why can't you do that just in late afternoon, just in a shorter amount of time? And so if you want to learn a foreign language, if I want to learn, I don't know, Japanese, I'm not expecting it that is going to happen overnight or that's going to happen in 2 days. I know it's going to take time. So I think it's important to bring people to really realize that the assumptions that we can do things fast is problematic. I mean, there's some learning that can occur very fast, but some really require, to be information to be processed. And so I think just the fact to be able to claim what I want to do with this adult learners require a specific amount of time that I've considered seriously and reflect on. Then to be able to claim that and argue for it is in itself a very strong aspect of the design of the training itself. And then obviously after we can go in the recipe and the cooking details of how we do the work itself, but that obviously we cannot talk about it here now. But I think claiming the space, claiming the time it takes to reflect on one's own experience, and claiming that it has value, that is not necessarily quantifiable in the same way that we could quantify, I don't know how many tweets or how many whatever we have in our life. That's not about quantification. It's about quality of space. And so I think that that's something we need to be able to claim in order to protect that space. And then after, we have to trust the fact that some processes unfold because there is time available. If you ask people to talk about themselves in a context where they don't have time, they won't feel that there is enough trust in the room to be able to start talking about meaningful things. So they will stay at the level of superficiality, and no significant learning is going to occur. So providing that space and time is also a way to bring people to feel trust, to be able to feel confident with each other, and therefore go deeper into reflection and learning opportunities.
Thank you. And we've just got time for one more question, which I'm going to bring forward from our colleagues in Ireland from the EPALE platform. And they've said, look, when we as individuals recognize rhythms that leave little or no time for change in our lives, are there principles of pattern disruption that can help us to break out of these cycles?
Well, that's a very tough one. I think that this idea of pattern disruption is crucial. And in my book, I talk about emancipation as the capacity to extract oneself from the patterns we tend to repeat over life. And not just at the individual level, but also at the collective level. So the first step is to be able to identify those patterns, because for many people, they're not even aware that they're repeating patterns. And not just in the everyday life, but also in situations that are kind of self-similar over time. It can be in the way we interact in relationship, in the way we relate to working environment, or in the way we relate to the experience of learning in formal context. So to be able to identify the fact that there are patterns in the way we experience those different situations is the first step. And then indeed, after, the crucial aspect is to be able to confront that experience with what others maybe have experienced in similar contexts, to see that there are different ways to experience those situations. So being in a group with 10 learners and question how they experience going back to university or going for the first time in higher education, and then you have 10 different interpretations of what it means. It's also a way to enrich our repertory or repository of possibility of what we can do, and maybe find alternative way to deal with a situation that may be experienced as challenging. So recognizing patterns and being able to enrich ourselves from the experience of others in order to see alternatives in the way we can react to a specific situation. I think that's definitely important steps.
Thank you. And we had a comment from Iva, who said that, we should, one of the practical suggestions is that maybe we could normalize the taking of a sabbatical by people in their 30s or 40s, which is, a really good time to invest in taking time out to do some adult learning, to do something new, to develop their passions, their hobbies, or perhaps transition to a new environment, so that the protected space, the sabbatical, creating that we should normalize that in our culture. So that was what Iva suggested when they were listening to what you were saying.
I like this idea of normalizing this idea, because it goes beyond the individual. We cannot face such challenges if we don't also address them collectively. So the idea of values, of norms within institution are crucial. So promoting specific values in the way we regard rest or break or rupture is also important. Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Thank you. Michelle, I have so enjoyed spending time with you this morning to talking about the concept of time, and lots of ideas there. And you mentioned that, we can absorb some of the way other cultures address time by travel. And I also recommend, reading books, watching films, and listening to music, and just experiencing other cultures, because they do bring new concepts, new language, new terminology for time, and that's so enriching, and very much at the heart of the way that adult education does things. So thank you for your suggestions, your practical suggestions, and reminding us that as our adult educators and people working in that area, our goal is to create a protected space. And that's not just a physical space and it's not just an emotional space, it's a temporal space. So thank you for sharing your ideas about rhythmic intelligence. And we will share on the online platform links to your research and your books for people who want to explore it further. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And it was really a pleasure to be with you this morning. And so have a nice day, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. So now it's time to have one of our live link ups. So we're about to go to Carmen in Spain, and we're going to go to Carmen de Soigny, who is in Madrid, and we're going to hear a little bit about what you have planned for your time later today. So hi, Carmen.
Good morning. Hi, Tamsin. Hi, everybody. We are the EPALE team in Spain. We are Laura, Laura, Miguel, Carmen, and me. And we are really happy to be here connecting live with you. We have been following all the interesting panels and discussions that you have put together. And well, all this confirms together with all the work that we have been doing that we are really on the right track in terms of empowering citizens and in terms of contributing to a more sustainable and digitalized world. So thank you very much for being with us in all this journey.
Yeah, today is a really special day for us as well, because we have our own event in the afternoon, and it's about lifelong learning to boost our digital skills. And it is composed of different panels in which we are going to show the digitalization plan, and we're going to talk with people who is connected with lifelong learning, informal micro-credentials, so people can get the digital skills they may be needing in their future working life. So thank you again. And if you are really interested, if you want to, feel free to contact us and we will share with you the link so you can join us together in this exciting event. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing some of it. And of course, possibly sharing the lovely warm sunshine from Madrid. Is it warm there?
It's raining today.
Oh, you've broken my idea of the weather in Spain. Okay, well, in that case, we have grey skies here in Brussels, so I share your experience of rain. But thank you so much for sharing some of the energy and the passion from the community in Spain. And we wish you the best of luck with your event later today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Now, when we were having the conversation with Michelle, just to let you know that I was hearing that on the platforms, we've got lots of thumbs up, heart emojis. People were really enjoying the time we spent with Michelle to talk about, this impact of our concept of time and what it means. So I'm glad you enjoyed it. I thought it was a really great conversation. Now we're going to go and see if we can connect with our colleagues in Zagreb. We had some technical difficulties this morning, but hey, I see you. Hello.
Hello, hi, Temsin. Can you hear us?
We can. Hello. Tell us what you've got going on today.
Okay, very well. Well, greetings from Zagreb, Croatia. It's a bit cloudy here in Zagreb, but that won't stop us. With our national side event, we are full of energy. We are talking about artificial intelligence in education. And I'm here at Hotel Zonar with my other colleagues from the NSS team Croatia. And we want to wish everyone good luck with the conference today, and also good luck to other colleagues who are organizing their national side events also.
Thank you very much. Lovely to see you all. And what a great topic, AI, because we discussed a little bit yesterday, but it's something that is so ever present in our lives. And it's something that we need to discuss and be aware of. So thank you and good luck to colleagues in Zagreb. I hope you have a fantastic conversation later today.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Okay, so now we're going to move to the next section of our conversation, and this is a panel which is going to help us again explore the experience of adult learning as a way to deliver better life prospects. So let me introduce our panel. I have Jana Harkonen, who is a team leader for international activities at, and excuse me if I don't pronounce it correctly, the Finnish Valo Valmenesus Distis. I had a go. And I also have Heather Luntians from the Rode Anthracite in Belgium, and Roberto Greco from Didaxe. So hello and welcome. So in this panel, and this is our sort of inspirational section where we try to explore what adult learning can deliver to personal development, to enhance our employability, and more importantly, promote social inclusion, because that's very much the theme of today's conversation. And Jana, I'm going to start with you because your organization exists to support the most marginalized parts of our community. And education and learning is one of the tools you use to deliver on that. Can you tell us why that is one of the tools that you consider important?
Of course, and greetings from sunny Helsinki, Finland. That might come as a surprise for most of you. Yes, I would very much like to tell about my definition of learning, which I have heard sometime, which is that learning is change in thinking and behavior. And I think that definition is quite nice and broad in a sense that when people find themselves in a vulnerable life situation, it can take a lot of changes in thinking, also about oneself and one's capabilities in order to progress towards education, employment, well-being, and participation, which are our goals in our work. And we go and support the people alongside of that path. So I think it's on one side, on the learning is about the person and learning about themselves, but also learning about maybe basic skills and some other essential skills in the working life. But also it's about discovering the potential. And I think that the role of the staff members is really important there.
Great. Thank you. Now, I know that you work with communities that can be really very marginalized. And one of the groups you work with are ex-offenders and people who are suffering or recovering from substance abuse. So these are really very fragile and very sort of difficult to reach and support communities. And you said that this education and adult learning is one of the areas that we can really, bring people in to share. Is there anything you can tell just briefly the particular nature of the groups that you work with and how adult learning, it's not an obvious thing that's the first thing you'd offer, but clearly it is for you.
Yes, I think in our organization we focus on the non-formal learning, and I think that's a very key element for our target group. There might be these ideas among our learners and participants that the formal education is not something for me and I will never make it. So that's why we start really step by step. And we have, for example, this training to become an expert by experience, which has been quite successful for ex-offenders. And it means that they can transform all of that life experience that may not look so well in a CV, but it will look good on a CV when people are able to transform it into actually a professional experience. And then they can work alongside with social workers, for example. And then maybe later on, I can also talk about our international activities and our adult learner mobilities, which are really, really also something really powerful to empower our people and support them on the path of learning.
Lovely. Thank you, Jana. Heather, let me bring you in because we've just heard from Jana working with ex-offenders, and you're further downstream because you often work in prison environments, and they are tough places by design, and they're designed to be places of punishment. So why is it so key to offer a learning opportunity in that space? How does it change how individuals experience their space and their own lives?
Yes. Also, good morning from me, from Belgium. Like you already said, it's a gray sky here in Belgium. Yes, for us, it is very important that inmates have different possibilities of learning during their time inside. We organize sports and cultural activities in all the prisons of Flanders and Belgium. And in this way, they have the possibility to learn on an informal way about, they will learn about social skills, soft skills, like, for example, dealing with rules and etc. But also how to connect and reconnect with people from the outside. Like sometimes we have activities together with citizens. Sometimes the activities are guided by coaches or teachers. And by participating in these activities, the inmates, they inspire that there are still people from outside who are interested in them, who wants to invest in them, who believes in them. And this really contributes to their self-confidence also. And we believe the self-confidence, they needed to be able to be open to learn. If the self-confidence is not there, they don't feel safe enough to learn. So we try to contribute for sure on this part. We also notice that our activities, they contribute to a more pleasant and a more safe, even more safe living environment in the prisons. We call it like active safety or dynamic safety instead of passive safety. And we also see when inmates can spend their time in a meaningful way in the prison. Also, the guards, they can witness the positive impact on the living environment, on the individuals itself. So we really believe in this, yes.
Thank you, Heather. And as you were talking, I was really struck by the link to our previous keynote, who talked about time and this sense of the oppression of time. And yet, when you're in prison, that's all you've got, really, because you're locked up and there's nothing else in there. And you said, Heather, that when the prison staff see people in prison making meaningful use of their time. I loved that phrase because it shows that that they are sort of getting ready for life outside. And so by offering learning opportunities, you're building up confidence, but you're also offering value and meaning to time, which would otherwise be sort of there is nothing to do in prison. That's specifically what it's designed to do, and you are offering the gift of the chance to do something of meaning and of value. So I wonder if you just wanted to make that link to the conversation we had earlier about the concept of time.
Yes, it's not completely true that they can do nothing in prison. There are other activities like work, for example. They can work, for example, they can have a job. But for us, it's also really important that when concerning social reintegration after the time inside, they have to reintegrate in society. And we often see that when their leisure time is not meaningful, once they are outside, it's really a high risk to offend again. Through our activities, we learn them. We offer them the experience that it's really important after work. You find some activities you like, you are passionate about. You will, when you enter, for example, a sports club or creative activities, you will meet new people. You will build a new circle of people around you. But we also know that not everybody in prison, for example, can work. There's not enough place to work. There's a big waiting list in different prisons. So especially for those people who are not able to work during the day, they're more than happy to participate in all kind of activities. And then it's very important that we are there, because if we cannot, if there's no organization who has the mandatory to organize all these kind of activities, then they are really stuck in their cell. So it would be really hard. So it's really important that we have the possibility to offer them all kind of these activities.
Thank you. Okay, Roberta, let me bring you in now, because your organization supports about 30 learners and trainers for mobility projects every year. And you've also, interestingly, one of the projects you've done is you've transformed a former mafia villa into a youth training center. So offering new life opportunities where once there was fear and control. And at the end of last year, your cooperative joined the EU level Pact for Skills. Now, adult learners have received a lot of focus through the Erasmus program recently. Why, for you, do you think that's so important? And what impact does that have on the communities that you work with?
Right. So, good morning, everyone, and good morning from sunny Italy. So we stick to the idea. So, yeah, the Erasmus mobilities we are part of, and we do use to integrate our non-formal as well learning programs for mostly unemployed and people with very low income in the area in which we work, are extremely important because our starting point is building trust. And so our users, our students, our adult learners, they have an issue with trust towards the world and towards themselves at first. So the first thing is about building confidence, but as well, they have had very delusional experiences, in particular with school, with formal education, and secondly, with the world of work. And so our idea is to integrate the mobilities within their learning path in order for them to feel included and to gain trust towards us so that they can establish a relation with us, which can lead to learning and then to competencies. And then competencies is what they need because they live in a very tricky part of Europe in which unemployment rate is extremely high, and in particular they live in a place where it's very touristic place. So seasonal jobs are what generally brings them and brings their economy on a yearly basis. So it's very complex for them also to manage. So we try to give them the competencies that they need in terms of management of their finances, but as well, we try to give them the competencies that they need to rejoin the active population and, of course, to overcome the disadvantage that they have right now, and that, again, brings them to a level of mistrust towards educational entities, third sector and social sector entities. And we try to tackle that type of feeling also in our courses and activities. And mobilities, again, are very important because we meet people and we include people in this activity, in the mobilities, that could not take part before. They were not part of a university, so they did not take part in Erasmus, typical, famous Erasmus program for university. They do not have any association in that area where they produce any youth exchange, or they were not part of schools who could deal with Erasmus, because schools in this area, they have, full hands with dealing with number of issues from structure to learning, etc. So this is the first time for many of them to travel, really, to meet someone else that is not a tourist and that comes from abroad or that they can meet abroad. So to meet diversity as well, for them it's first time. So that's what we try to do with mobilities, with Erasmus mobilities, with our training courses.
Thank you. And I'm really struck by yesterday when we had a conversation with Gemma, who comes from Extremadura, and she was explaining in a similar way her region is quite remote, quite rural, lots of small communities with few economic opportunities, few jobs. And she talked about the, lots of they situate their training centers in these small communities, and she talked about the importance of building confidence, and you're talking today about building trust. So we're starting to get this picture of how adult education builds the social fabric and helps to create sense of community. Heather, you talked about the work you do is essentially to bring up citizens in contact into prisons, and also to offer prisoners an opportunity to engage with, through theatre and others, and art, with the community outside. So making those connections together. And again, that's something that Yanni, you talked about. So we are making a strong case, I think, about that adult education yes, it delivers skills, but it delivers so much more in that, connecting of people, building the trust, the confidence, and the connections. Jana, I see that you are nodding your head. Do you want to share with that?
Yes, I think it was resonated very strongly what Roberto said, and also what Heather said about the self-confidence and safety and trust. And I also agree that those are really the basic elements. And also what you, Tamsin, said about not only the skills, but there is something else. And I would like to add also around the time concept, because we do the adult learner mobilities with people who are in a vulnerable life situation. And the mobilities usually last 1 week. And we could think that that's a very, very short period of time, but our learners take such huge steps on their path during that 1 week. And I'm like, there's something magical about it. Like, we haven't really been able to define it, but I think it's a combination of being able to be in a new space, in a new environment, and feel that people belong in the group of people who are able to travel abroad, who are somehow worthy of the experience of being part of these learning programs. And then all the that's a very, very important thing. And I think the empowerment and self-efficacy comes from there. And then also in terms of the skills, I think it comes really organically. Skills such as time management, problem solving, digital skills, social skills, language skills, because all of those skills are in constant use on the mobility. And then also I get these feedbacks how people, like something like a light is switched on and there's like all of these new thoughts regarding the personal future, which opens up there. And I think it takes a longer time, and it maybe takes somehow different things if it happens in Finland. Like, it's a much more fast and strong experience when it happens abroad.
Thank you. Maybe, Heather, you could comment on what we've just heard from Jana about the sense of belonging, that part of the value of it, and even if it's just a short mobility, but the whole purpose is that it opens up this emotional space and this sense of connectedness. Is that something you see with your work?
Yes, I can give one example. For example, in summertime, in different prisons, we can invite football teams or volleyball teams to come and play a match against the inmates. Both sides, if we can say like this, they really enjoy the game, just the sports game. But after, we try to offer also the possibility to have like in normal world outside, we often go to have a drink after when we have a sports match or something, and we offer this also. So the inmates who played football or volleyball against the people from outside, they can go to a place and just have a drink together. And this connection, they even like more than just the sports game they just did before, because they just can have a chat about usual stuff during their life. Sometimes people from outside, they really ask questions why you are inside and stuff like this, but they answer it with a lot of humor. Many people from outside, they come back every year again or every summer again. And this is also like a really nice example of connecting in our case with people from outside. And it's really nice to see that the both groups, they really like it, and they really value it, and that's the reason every year they come back and they want to play against to each other. And it's, of course, the sports game is there, and it's nice they can play against some other people than always the same people or the same colleagues, but more the connecting activity we can add after the sports game it's like more important. So this is, for example, one example we always experience the connection with people from outside is so important and so valuable.
That's great. Thank you. We've had a question from a member of our people who are watching online. They said, how do the various environments and communities you engage with influence the way you approach your adult learning training? So, how do you essentially tailor what you do based on your understanding of the situations of your learners? So, if you're able to just give me a sort of short 1 minute brief answer on that, that would be great. Who on the panel wants to go first?
If I may.
Yes, sure.
Right. So for me, the key word in this question and in what you were bringing up is community. So for me, it's different the work I do in different offices I have, and sorry, my cooperative has. So in Cellule, where we have the youth center, which is a requalification project within a confiscated villa, we have to build a community. So our work and our educational activities are all directed at creating a community that is not there. And so even some very informal sort of learning path, which might be even a concert, a theater show, something that brings them together, and the idea of them having the time and the space and the trust in that space to discuss, come up with matters, come up with difficulties, having someone they trust to speak to, it's important. When I do my trainings for adult learners in Caserta, which is the place I am right now, which is a way different city and a way bigger community, and with some community within, I do work with people who have the need, for example, of much more direct need for competencies. They need to understand how to manage their finances. They need to understand what is the rights that they can have at work and what are not their rights, etc., etc. So it's much more straightforward. While in Cellule, I need to build the community and a sense of belonging in the place that I do work within.
Thank you. Heather or Jana, would you like to respond? How does the specific circumstances that your learners find themselves in shape the way you approach the training?
Maybe I can comment briefly.
Yes.
I think the first word that came to my mind was encountering, and somehow, like maybe it's our motto or something like that, like encounter people as people, and really there's always something there's always something good in every person, and we don't have to focus too much on the past. We look at the future, and we also we are like always on the same side as the person. Like what we want for them is something good in the future. And I think that as horizontal encounter as possible also creates the basis for the creating the community somehow.
Great. So you meet them where they are, with good intentions for them.
Exactly.
And in a very horizontal, so you're flattening the power dynamics.
Yeah.
Thank you. Heather.
Yes, we are always trying, but it's not always easy in the justice system, but because it's a very vertical organization we work in. But we, as much as possible, we try to consultate the inmates about our activities, about the things we want to organize. We have in different prisons also sports responsibles between the inmates, and we can really work together with them about bringing ideas for new activities, but also past activities we evaluate. Can we improve something? We need another teacher, something like this. And we do this sometimes even in real meetings together with guards and together with the local director of the prison, and the prisoners, they really appreciate it because they are talking and thinking about budget, about planning, about which kind of activities. So if as much as possible, we try to do it together, that they also come not only participate in the activities itself, but also participate in the organization, in the thinking, in the preparing. They also welcome, for example, the people from outside who comes in. They have the responsibility to go to them, to welcome them. But like I said in the beginning, it's not always possible, but we try as much as possible to let them participate with us in the organization of all our activities.
Thank you, Heather. I mean, what the three of you have described, I think what comes to my mind is the word respect. That you treat the learner with respect and you give them a space, a protected space to be a partner to co-create that. And I'm reminded yesterday of the opening message that we had from Annalisa Boni, who is a councillor at the city of Bologna, and she described how over the archway, the entry to the city of Bologna, they have this message that from day one, from the day of your birth, we consider you as a local Bologna citizen. And even though they legally don't have the right to award citizenship, it's a state of mind that you have value, you have worth, and we will treat you as someone who we include and we serve. And each of you three, in the way you described your approach to adult learning, have built in that respect. You build the community, you build trust, you engage, you listen, you accompany in a sort of horizontal, non-power dynamic way, even within the constraints of the prison system. So I want to say a very warm thank you to Jano, to Heather, and to Roberto for sharing some of the amazing work from within the EPALE community. And we'll make sure the links to what you do are shared on the platform so people can find out more. And I've been told that across the social platforms, as you were talking, we got lots of thumbs up and heart emojis. So people were really enjoying hearing from your experience. So thank you very much for joining us today and to share your experience.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Wonderful. So we are now going to move to our sort of final section of this morning. And this is very much an inspiration session. And I hope you find it as wonderful as we did to prepare it, because we are talking about creativity and how creativity is a tool for empowerment and inclusion. And I'd like to introduce our brilliant panel. So I have Khaled Barake, who is a conceptual artist and activist from CoCulture. I have Sonia Nandzik, who is the co-founder and CEO of Refocus Media Labs Foundation. I have Kritikos Mwanza, who's the founder of the Book Club, which we'll hear later is a book club where you don't have to read the books. And we have Aaron Berg, who is a director for the Circus of Knowledge. So welcome all of you. This is our conversation where we are going to unleash the power of creativity. So we tend to think that developing a curriculum and a program is all about meeting national targets, etc. And you are all, in your own way, powerfully going to argue for the power of creativity. So let's hear from each of you. Why should creativity be part of the adult learning approaches? And I'm going to start, Sonia, if I can, with you. How does it make sense for us to use creativity?
Well, it makes sense to use it in basically every area of your life. We work with communities that are very much marginalized right now, with refugees, asylum seekers, and people who are supposed to be in an asylum procedure and will probably never have this opportunity. Like, for example, some LGBTQI communities in Africa who are unable to really leave the country or reveal their gender. And through creativity, through the learning process, they are able to reach not only their potential, but also change something about their reality. And we're talking about advocacy for their rights, for who they are, but we're talking also about everyday life, because if you are in a very underprivileged position, it takes only this one time when you go from being a refugee, a migrant, a person without opportunities, to become a creator. And once you become a creator, you really start thinking about yourself differently. And in all our programs, we see it all the time when this creative program awakes something in an individual and takes them from being this person who is stuck in a refugee camp, who thinks like there's no perspective or their future is basically decided for them by other forces, by other governments, by the lack of opportunities, to actually start thinking of themselves as people who have impact and can create the future. The motto, by the way, of our organization is real lives, real skills, real futures. And through this creative process of teaching people creative media skills, we aim to impact their future.
Thank you. I think I'm going to bring in Aaron next, because there's something you just said there, Sonia. You said, when they arrive as, if you like, as refugees or migrants, asylum seekers, and yet when they become creators, and it's that process of becoming something else that's so liberating. And Aaron, as someone who directs theatre, this process of becoming, and unleashing creativity is something that you see and you foster in people. So with your work in the theatre and also in the circus, tell us a little bit about what you see about the transformative power of creativity.
Oh, well, first of all, thank you for the invitation. It's very exciting to speak about creativity and learning, because it's something that I've been doing for 20, 30 years. But I'd just like to say, to start, I'm not an expert in adult education, and I'm not an educator. I'm a theater maker through and through. But I've learned over the years, especially working on a European capital of culture, where we decided that culture is not only art and that culture goes much deeper, to work in really large-scale participatory projects that involve dialogues, which is intergenerational. So in a way, I work with children, but I also work with adults. And like Sonia before me, I've worked a lot with refugees and still do here in Austria and other places, work in prisons as well. So because what we learn is that all the stuff that people want to do, when we start to bring artistic tools into the process, it goes faster and often better. So both learning process, soft skills learning, in a way, there is no learning without creativity. And I hope to collaboratively create projects with people in different contexts in which we're all learners, so that we're all experts of our own lives. And there is no learning without playing from childhood. Unfortunately, playfulness is beaten out of us in schools rather than promoting. So we're creating areas where you're not allowed to make mistakes. And in play, it's wonderful to make mistakes, because that's how the best way to learn. So we employ tools of artists, and also it's not only intergenerational, it's also we work with different genres, interdisciplinary, because as Ken Robinson said, we're all talented, but we're all talented differently. So often in these very big projects, sometimes with thousands and thousands of citizens that we work of all different ages, we ask them what they want to do. So they might not know the name of an artist they want to work with, but they know that they might want to dance or sing. And then we create a pool of artists that supports that. So we are also embedding artists in schools to work with teachers long-term, and not just to come in for 2-3 days. And we see that the results are amazing, and they're not linear, they're really exponential. And the longer you do it, the better things get. We get wonderful, this is not from adults, but from youths that tell us that they learn that they also have good ideas. And there's nothing better than that, to learn that, to re-engage with your own creativity, with your own playfulness. So we are working on creating also more scientific studies. I'm now, as you said, I'm running a theater called the Circus of Knowledge, which connects art and science, which is also about creating trust in science. We live in Austria, where most adults don't trust science. We're on the one before last place in the EU, just before Croatia. We're not proud of it. So how can we re-engage with the population? So we also go into public places. We bring in families. We do a lot of workshops parallel to the work. But what we do see is that the more creative, the more playful things are, the more we learn. But all of us learn, and that's the beauty That's the beauty of engaging with citizens and creating spaces of engagement where we all work together on the same level. So the artists are not the experts. We all bring different tools into the equation, and the citizens we call citizen artists. So we're all artists, and here it's in the scientific institution we also connect citizen science and citizen artists to work together and explore and learn through very creative means. And I can't imagine doing it any other way, because people become better at things because they have fun doing it. And I think that's something that we can explore, the whole thing of fun when we work together.
Just out of curiosity, I'm interested to know, the artists, the dancers, and the creatives who work with the citizen artists. Are they surprised by what they find? Does it change their own? Because obviously they've learned a discipline and they will have spent years learning how to do things. But are they surprised, and do they themselves take into their own practice things that they've learned from citizen artists?
Absolutely. I think most artists that I usually engage with artists that not necessarily have had these kind of experiences before. I'm always looking, so I'm not looking for the art transmitters, but really artists who are in the middle of their careers as theater makers, as dancers. And I say, why don't you do a detour with us? Why don't you explore something new? And they always say to me that it's a life-changing experience, and they don't want to see their career continue without having that experience again and again in their life. I think it's also teaching artists that it's a way that it can be part of your career, and you're not less of an artist just because you do that. So no, I think I don't know any that have told me they never want to do this again, or they don't see it as a really life-changing experience. But we do a training. We do a kind of training of trainers before we send them into the field, so they know a bit what's coming. And you have to learn as an artist that always wants to see their ideas happen. And when there are clashes, I usually go and I say, look, you're trying to force them to do something and you're not listening enough. And once we learn to listen and create spaces where we listen, we can do amazing things together.
Great. Thank you very much. Kritikos,
Pleasure.
let me bring you in now, because Irene has just said at the end how important it is to listen. And that in your book club, and you'll tell us a little bit about how that works. It's so much is around listening, and the profound exchange that can happen when we open up by listening and putting forward ideas. Tell us what you're doing.
Yes, hi, thank you very much for the invite. I'm redesigning how we interact when it comes to book clubs. I'm redesigning the traditional concept of a book club by breaking down the books into certain quotes. So anybody that joins doesn't have to read the book in order to participate, in order to feel that they are heard or knowledgeable about the topics we'll be discussing. And as Iran said, I think we beat creativity out of kids in schools. And I think it's very important to have creativity when it comes to education, because, especially for adults, because the most prevalent form of education for the longest time, I guess, is the teacher speaks and teaches, and the students just have to be quiet and take notes and learn and, show up to class the next day. And with the book club, the concept is very simple, and it's very much focused on peer learning or peer teaching. So everybody has to listen to each other to learn different things on topics like love, topics like self-love, how to make a friend, etc. And with that, you have a voice, and your voice matters in the room, and you educate others as you learn from others as well. I've done this in schools, I've done this in prisons, and also like private members clubs and companies as team building. And in the schools, I see the most beautiful exchange, because even the students get to ask questions to the teachers. And these are topics that we never really learn about. So even the teachers are students when it comes to talking about love, or talking about friendship, or talking about, how to deal with grief. And so I think by changing the way we engage with different traditional topics, practices like book clubs, maybe figuring out how we can change how we experience the circuit of knowledge, how we experience art, and break down those barriers. A lot more people are open to learning and to engaging. Yeah.
Thank you, Kritikos. And again, really interesting to hear how this is actually it's a form of peer learning, and everyone in the room has to say something, or has something to share and to participate and be part of it. So the book club is a trigger, but it's not traditionally. You have to read the book and only discuss the book. You take some of the ideas and concepts in the group in the book, and a human emotion like grief or anger, masculinity, race, prejudice, something that might come through in the book, and then allow everyone in the room to share their experience. Let me bring in Khaled now, because you have something which I think is quite interesting, which is the practice of necessity. Now, we've been talking all today about how adult learning is a way out of poverty, a way out of marginalization and social exclusion. You've got this practice of necessity. What is it, and how does it give power to those whose life experience has just been about constraints and restrictions?
Yeah, hi, good morning, everyone. Thanks again for the invite, and pleasure to listen to everyone. So practice of necessity, like usually art practices, we call our practices art practices, but I figure out that all the time I was responding to necessity because I was restricted since I was in Syria. I was born in Syria. And then you have kind of all the time situation driving creativity to overcome the necessity. And the necessity, it can be personal necessity or collective necessity. And I think how it can create, also I'm not an educator myself, but I'm using in general art as a way of even self-education. I want to emphasize how much creativity is important, because while of course I'm producing and interacting with the world, it becomes a tool for me for engagement and self-learning by creating, for example, anything related to any topic, any artwork. So it's very, very important tool, because as also all the previous speakers said, we grow up as a children, we grow up creatives, and then we grow out of it, right? Like the schools kind of forbid us from developing this creativity. And there was a very huge research also done by, I can't remember now the professor, but following students from early age until they grow up and see when they start losing creativity, not gaining creativity. So I teach sometimes art, but I all the time say I don't teach art, I provoke creativity, because art is something, it's a skill, it's a craftsmanship, it's something you can develop, while creativity it's something you can empower, or you can actually spark or reactivate, because I truly believe that we all have this creativity inside us, and especially through the method of learning, because of playing, sorry, because it allows you to go beyond kind of the restriction of the classroom, right? So, and when you start playing or when you're becoming creative, there's no space for right or wrong. There's no space where you can maybe make mistakes. Like we know this as a kids, right? So when we learn a language, we are not afraid to use it as a kids. We just, and because we are not afraid to be made fun of. While when we are adults, we get kind of stuck into that. And I think the creativity push us toward there's no space of mistakes, so everything is possible. So I'm through the practice of necessity, I kind of try to develop platform of inclusion that allow the setup of the platform, the exhibition, because I'm doing different things, or the organization that I'm running, the setup, it allows mistakes. There's no judgment as well in the learning. There's something that I find also very, very, very important, which is sometimes the silence that is needed to be creative, because we all the time, especially now with social media and with all the platforms, we kind of get overwhelmed by the amount of images and emotions that we have to go through, and that will kind of limit so much the space inside of you to be able to be creative. And I think offering a platform, as I mentioned, where people are mentally and they are present in a space that allow the other way of thinking that can be implemented through this silence, then they can become creative. Yeah, if that makes sense.
It does, thank you. And I think it connects very nicely to our keynote conversation this morning about the importance of creating protected space of deceleration of time to give people the space to breathe and reflect and make new narratives about themselves. And I think that's really helpful. We're getting lots of comments on our social media challenges. People are loving this conversation, really want to see it. Someone suggested next year, let's have the whole conference about creativity. They really like the conversation. Greetings from Portugal, from Greece, from Bulgaria, from Hungary. They're all loving this. We've got a question in that I'm going to ask all of you because I think this is quite an interesting one. We've had somebody who's asked us whether the work that you do, particularly for refugees or migrants who come from areas of conflict, there's an enormous amount of trauma and negative experiences that people bring with them, and maybe it's physically embodied, it's in mental health. How does the work that you do, the creative work, help to release that, help to heal that, help to express that? Who would like to say something? Sonia, I saw you were nodding, so maybe I can come to you first.
Yeah, I would gladly start because it's very timely for us. So maybe just to give a little bit of explanation how we work. We work as a center, as a network of media labs. So in every of our media lab, we teach creative media skills, and every lab is different. But our first lab was created on the Greek island of Lesbos, and it is, I would say, infamous for being the refugee crisis island. That okay, we can put it aside, a separate discussion about whether this is how it's supposed to be viewed. But in 2017, when we started our workshops there, the idea was simple: to give people something additional to what they have in the camp. And in the camp, they had very, very little. And we were very much aware that people are coming from very, very problematic places. People come with traumas from those countries. People come from those traumas from the road, the journey that they went through, especially women. We had women with many, many, many issues, starting from sexual violence, having to say goodbye to their child on the way because of the drowning in the sea. So things that are unimaginable for us people in a safe Western countries to go through. And we were thinking how this creative process can help healing this. And we never asked people to tell their stories directly, like to share it with us. It was never an assignment. We were waiting for people to be ready. And strangely, all the first assignments done by people were related to their situation as refugees. So there was this need of showing, of sharing something. Sometimes it was about the situation in the camp, but we decided at some point we have to also put this aside. And there was a week when the main assignment was, you can tell whichever story you want. You can do whatever. We gave you the tools, we gave you the knowledge, we gave you the skills. You have all this fantastic equipment that our donors brought to this island. The only thing is, the story cannot be about you being a refugee, anybody else being a refugee, something that is refugee-ish. And it was a huge challenge for everybody because so many of our students, they were in this process of getting to Greece for years. They spent a year, 2, 3. At that point, the 3 years of waiting for asylum, for a decision, or being moved to a mainland was a standard. So you can imagine if a person is waiting for 3 years in a refugee camp and there's really nothing to do, there was almost no programming inside, gigantic lines for absolutely everything. This also impacts their mental well-being. And people really struggled coming up with a topic that is something different than just their identity as a refugee, but they did it. And this was the moment that it would always change the situation for them, that they would start seeing that they have many other identities, that they are mothers, their daughters, they used to be small businessmen, they were doctors, they were mechanics, and there are so many things that is interesting about them, right? That being a refugee is something that happened to them at this particular time of their life, but it should not stay with them forever. And this was one of the main thing we were saying, that the program is supposed to take you out of the camp both physically and mentally. And the second thing was even more important. When the situation changed, and right now people are being processed much faster, they're not waiting 3 years on Lesbos Island, for example, but they are still coming with those horrible, even maybe worse traumas than before, because those are people who, for example, in Afghanistan waited much longer, came with even physical wounds, came with such a big baggage. We decided to open those short workshops and change a little bit the purpose of the program and make it more into this art through therapy type of therapy through art type of a program. And just next week we're starting a really fantastic workshop that is a stop motion workshop to tell traumatic stories through the stop motion. So if somebody knows how it looks like, it's basically like a fairy tale, like a cartoon, right? So people not only will learn the skills how to do it themselves, but will also be able to tell those stories in a much safer way. And I feel like this is one of the ways to go. It works for many people in the program, and it was tested already in several camps. It's a new thing with us. And the second thing we're going to do is a very much traditional filmmaking storytelling, which works with so many journalists we have, for example, from Afghanistan especially. They came and they have this need of continuing their work and sharing the things that they went through.
Great, thank you. Aaron, you've indicated you'd like to speak next.
Yeah, so many wonderful things are being said. Wanted to comment and see if we could bring some of the things together. I think what Sonia said, again, something really important about that when we do art with people from different backgrounds, it's also important that we see them as people beyond that definition. They're not refugees, it's not their identity. Refugees is a title that was given to them, that was something that was imposed on them. They didn't want to be refugees. And their lives are so much richer than just that, and they lose a lot of that richness. And Kritikos mentioned the theme of love. So if one example that I can give, which was a giant European project in 7 cities, we did Orpheus and Majnun. So I always like to start with cultural heritage. So we all know in the West, or some know the Orfeo and Eurydice story, but not everybody knows the Leila Majnun story, which I assume Khaled would know better than most people on the panel, which is one of the most beautiful love stories ever written and is known in the Islamic world. We took these 2 love stories and we made a big project with a lot of participation, thousands of people in each city, about love, loss, and longing. And then people work together. So I think a very important aspect of building trust is that people get to know you as a human being and you get to know others as a human being, because of course there's a lot of projections in both ways. Not all Austrians are Nazis and not all Austrians are against refugees. Actually, the Nazis are in a minority, but they're the loudest, and loud minorities always impose everything on everybody else. So I think it's important that people who come or people who've been traumatized get to meet that there are other good people that are actually on their side. I think that's a very important step to feel more welcome and to see their skills, but not only impose our skills on them, but let them teach us as well. That's a very important component, because they also have know-how, they also have expertise, and to have them teach us about their food or their songs or their skills in science. It's just people come from all different jobs. So I think that's really important. And in some cases in our work, because we are artists, and I always warn artists, we can do a lot, but we can't solve all the problems politicians create, right? We are artists in the end. So in cases where we know we're going into rooms where there's a lot of trauma, we bring psychologists and healthcare people with us who know how to catch them and support them, because that's something artists could and should not take on themselves, because they would fail. So that's part of, now we're working a big project on resilience. So we work with psychologists, and the artists are being trained, and they go with that knowledge into their normal workshops about other things, but they flow in the thing about resilience into the workshops themselves. So it's also, we learn as artists about resilience, but we share that knowledge, and we are supervised by these psychologists who can help us and support us in getting that across in a theatrical exercise about a completely different topic. And I think
Thank
maybe
you.
just one more word is that I created a methodology that I call curiosity zones. It's a wonderful, very simple, because the word curiosity itself just already opens up the mind, and you can learn a lot about each other in a curiosity zone, because that word already creates that thinking. So thank you.
Khaled, let me bring you in now because I saw you nodding through that conversation, and this really critical issue of healing from trauma, being able to express, share experiences, but also not allow that to be the only thing that defines you. To be able to also bring some of the positive memories and experiences that you bring. Tell us how you do that in your work.
Sorry, ask me the question again. How to bring?
The original question we got from the audience is, has anyone had experience of the using creativity to help express trauma and heal trauma? Because for many new arrivals in Europe, that this is the experience they've just been through, so that it's really very much right there, and it's then they often experience administrative trauma by stuck for years waiting to be processed, and others. So how does creativity allow some of that trauma to be healed or expressed or recognized?
Yeah, I think expressed is, for me, what is maybe my area of expertise. I think healing, maybe it will go through the process, because I also want to emphasize that we are not prepared to sometimes letting people know how to letting people tell their stories, which I think is very, very important, because we can trigger people without knowing, with very good intention that we want to maximize their voices, we want to include them, etc., etc. But sometimes we don't know what people go through. We don't know the depth of their trauma. We just don't also have the tools to deal with it. So I think it's very, very important. It's not when we are creating kind of exercises to remember that. That's why I was talking about creating platforms, creating environments, creating situation where this could happen, using something I use in my work called relational art, where the artists are not in the center, they are just the engine connecting people together and expertise. And then in this case, you have the right people to deal with this process, not myself. Myself is creating the kind of, again, the platforms, because also, but what I find it's very important, very, very essential, is also creativity can find alternative way for people to express themselves. It's very easy, right? Like the most easier example to mention is painting and drawings, right? So we know how much you can, how many emotions you can channel through creating artwork, especially if you're an adult who never experienced something as such. So without necessarily being triggered, because you go into your personal journey with this, or with the maybe writing poetry, or with, again, playfulness, maybe with the storytellings, because also I worked in several projects with asylum seekers, or with refugees, or with people, victims also of sieges in different anyway situation, where we try to encourage people to tell their stories. And it's incredible once you open this kind of space for them to exist, not the way how we want them to go. Because also sometimes, as an artist or educator or whatever, we have a methodology, we have an idea where things should go, then we push people toward this direction. And I think I mentioned maybe this before, I like it when it's open field, and you just open the doors and everyone can go in any direction they want, and you just combine them with their journey or where they want to go, and kind of try to push them slowly toward this direction or this direction, but not necessarily to guide them where you think is right. That's why the expertise, or the, for example, psychotherapist, or using art as a therapy, like people who are coming from this field, are essential if we are talking about healing and trauma processing. So, because also something I notice also, when we exist in the same environment, we tempt to repeat the same thing, right? So if I want to tell you my story, like I'm here, I'm from Syria, blah blah blah. So you ask me in the same environment, like tell us your story. I will repeat it in the same way that I kind of to protect myself. Once you create an environment that allow to other thinking to happen or to other behaviors to happen, then people start becoming themselves creative how to tell their story. It empowers them to overcome sometimes even the psychological challenges they have, and we can see also this in the classrooms, right? So when you ask kids, they are more again like outcoming, and they tell their stories in so many creative way, and they use even like their hands, they color, they dance it, they whatever. While we are an adult, we try to protect ourselves all the time, and these creative processes or creative platforms allow these emotions to go anywhere, but again it should be supervised.
Thank you. Kritikos, let me bring you in because I know that in your book clubs, and sometimes you said they're in companies, they're in corporate environments. It must be sort of it's not a very obvious place to have very personal, very meaningful conversations where people allow themselves to be vulnerable or express some of these things. But this is something that often happens in your book class events. Tell us how you create that sort of safe space for vulnerability.
I think it's one thing that I've noticed has happened with the book club a lot, and it's quite recent that I understood why and how. And it's very simple. It's because I use quotes from books, and they're on cards, and at the bottom is a question, and the questions are quite personal. So for example, this quote says, what are the best ways to set boundaries with your friends without being too strict, right? And I could ask you that question, then you might be confused or you might have a difficult time answering. But if you attach that to a quote that talks about, I don't know, somebody's experience in a book, of course, it sort of disarms you, and you feel related because the book already talks about this, and it becomes a really huge domino effect. So one person answers it, and most of the time they answer honestly or they answer very candidly. Another person answers it, and next thing you know, you're in a room of 15 to 20 people that are ready to open up about like their trauma with their fathers or something like that. And I think it's a quite disarming thing. Especially, I think the main ingredient of the book club that I've noticed or that I've learned over the years is that it's the importance of a table. We did a book club with EPALE on a digital platform, which is good. A lot of people opened up as well. It was really nice. But I've noticed when it's in real life and there's a table, instead of sitting down and they're just seats around that look like an AA meeting, once you have a table, it sort of separates you and it unites you as well. You feel parts of a group. You feel parts of the people that are in the discussion. At the same time, you also have something covering your legs. You have something that's sort of hiding part of your body from the group, so you feel more open to sharing things. And I think it's a beautiful thing. It's happened in prisons, it's happened in schools, it's happened in settings where the book club wasn't even supposed to happen. I just so happened to have cars on me when I was at a Christmas dinner with mainly strangers. I only knew 2 people at this Christmas dinner, and my friends told me to use the cards. We ended up talking about our experiences with love and things like that. And somebody ended up crying because they opened up about how they didn't talk to their grandma enough before she passed away. And it's such a simple thing. It's just questions and cards, but like you said, it's very disarming.
Thank you. I just want to reference some of the input that we're getting across our social media platforms. Lots of people really enjoying this conversation and finding it useful and valuable and enjoying it. We've had colleagues from Slovakia who've opened up the big issue of the patriarchy. They're saying, what strategies do you use to deal with patriarchal control of women that often prevent them from learning and engaging in participation? And we've also had a question from our colleagues in the EPALE Ireland community who said, look, creativity is everything. We can't create a better society without the ability to imagine what that looks like. How do we normalize exercising the imagination, not just for the creative people, but for everyone? How do we encourage people to be creative about what they're thinking? So there you've got colleagues. Who wants to pick up? First of all, how do we address patriarchy and the fact that women are often very controlled in many environments. They don't get to speak out, they don't get to physically be present. How do you deal with gender dynamics? And then secondly, how do we make sure that creativity isn't something that is reserved for the creative people, but it is something that is, as Irene, you said, it's innate, it's in everyone. How do we help people own that and take it forward? So who wants to kick off?
If I may, on the first one,
Please.
because again, it's a very timely question. We are about to start next year a program for women inside Afghanistan. And as you know, it's not in the media anymore. What is happening right now in Afghanistan after Taliban took over, the situation of women is absolutely terrifying. I think it's the worst situation, it's the worst place to be a woman in the whole world. So education is basically almost completely forbidden. Women cannot work in many areas. And we were thinking how to address it because so many people in our community in Europe actually come from Afghanistan. And we had those wonderful examples of women who blossomed to be leaders of their communities. When we started, we had 20 men and 1 woman in the program. Everybody was telling us you have to create a separate program for women only because of the cultural differences. Women do not want to mix with men, they do not feel safe. We were trying to tackle it from a different place. What do we do to make them feel safe in this place? Because if we're giving them all of those skills, we're giving them for a purpose, so they use it in a society, and the society is not divided into men and women. We all live together, so we have to learn how to use those skills and our potential to create this new world, right? And with time and example of this 1 woman, in the next semester, we had several, and then we reached 50-50, and 1 year we even had more women than men in the program. We simply, saw those excited young women running around the center for refugees with cameras. It was like, how on earth did you get this? And like, what you're doing with this? And they started, using it in their way, their female way. Men were more like hardcore. They just wanted to learn how to take pictures of their children, work as studio photographers, maybe just do something for their families. And this is how it started. And so many of them grew to be wonderful leaders. And one of our students just produced a film that goes all around, will go next year all around film festivals. And so it grows. It starts with an example, but she was telling me how absolutely shy and terrified she was when she first joined the classes. She was like, I always sat in the front row, so I'm close to the teacher and farther from all the boys and men. I didn't know what is going to happen and how they're going to treat me. And it was true that once the classes ended and everybody had to return to the camp, the situation completely changed for them, right? So we acknowledged that they could only really blossom outside the camp. But when we started thinking what to do really for women who live and have almost no possibility of leaving those oppressive societies, like right now, Afghanistan under the Taliban ruling, we really couldn't come up with a great solution for several months. And we decided that we're gonna start teaching them those media skills online, so that they, with time, can be their own advocates, so that they use their voice from inside Afghanistan for their own cause. And this was one of the main needs when we did the needs assessment. This was one of the highest ranked. They also said, like, we need some kind of education. So we partnered with an organization that teaches very basic skills, English, mathematics, and so on, so that the gap is not growing bigger. But they were just like, skills is something that if we ever will be allowed to go back to a job market, if we will ever be able to really do something, we will already have it. We will not waste those years, right? So there are ways to do things around, and it's a very challenging program, for example, for us, because internet connection, for example, in Afghanistan is a massive problem. We want to reach women in rural environments as well, not only Kabul, where there's no network there, right? So a question how we deliver certain equipment, how do we get routers, mobile devices there, and so on. And not even mentioning that Afghanistan is on the sanctions list. We cannot transfer any money to Afghanistan. We have to be very creative how to do it. But the goal is worth it, right? And we stand at this position that women have to be their own advocates. There's only that much we can say about their situation here from like a position of, let's be honest, privileged people in Europe. We really have to get their voices out there, because what is being said right now is just the same thing. Journalists, media, they just repeat. There are not many media in Afghanistan. It's just almost the same thing. This is what Khaled also mentioned, that this label is just being repeated and repeated, and we hear the same stories. Nobody, no journalist is going really deep into what is going on in Afghanistan. They do not stay with stories. They do not follow those stories. So this will be up to the women that decided to stay or had to stay to fight for their rights. And our role is the supportive role to do whatever we can to ease this process for them and enable it.
Thank you. Khaled, I saw you nodding several times in that. So maybe you want to come in on this to address, either the aspect of, how do we make sure everyone feels creative and it isn't just something reserved for the creatives? And also, how do we challenge a huge barrier like patriarchal control?
Yeah. So I just want also to double what Sonia said, because I think it's very important. Most of the time, we as refugees are painted with the same brush, like everyone, especially by the media and the news and journalists, even with the best intention, right? And I don't want to put the best intention all the time there, but even though, because it follows foreign policies, blah, blah, blah. So, but even with that, there's no expressive of our complex individual identities, right? We all the time, the refugees, the women, the LGBT, the whatever. And I think creativities allow these nuances to be seen. And specifically by giving the tools, as Sonia said, to the people to tell their stories. So it's not an artist, filmmaker, journalist, I'm going to a camp and portraying people, but instead I'm taking the camera off my shoulder and give it to the people and let them tell their story through creative tools. I think that's what I would think, not necessarily precisely on the patriarchal questions or in the empowering women questions, but I think that can be applied literally in all aspects of any kind of direction we want to go when we work when marginalized group. But I think how to use creativities and not be able to, like, only for creative people is what I mentioned. I think again, like, there's no one is not creative, and I'm very, very, very sure of this, because that's what I said. Like, when I teach, I don't teach art. I just like, let's sit together, let's have the most absurd, silly ideas. Let's allow this to take a place. Let's allow this, like, I love even in my practice, like, what if, like, just let's, because the moment you start think as an adult, you kill your creativity. And the moment you create a platform this for what if to happen, then you kind of start becoming creative. And you don't even need me as a creative for you to create. But what I do again, like, or the methods I use, I create platform for people to be creative. So through the creativity that I have, which is again not a gift, it's a skill, and I'm very confident with that I don't think creativity it's a gift or something you're born with. I think yes, definitely born with, but it's not something you are special about. Maybe like painting or playing music, maybe it's yes, but I think creativity is just the muscles. And once you kind of keep practicing the muscles, it just becomes your normal way of thinking. And again, I don't think like, for example, for me, people say, yeah, it's great how to come with this good ideas. Like, just when you work with math, for example, you train your brain with number. When you encourage yourself to think with no right and wrong, with no space of mistakes, you kind of constantly repeating this process, and this muscles become stronger. So your normal way of thinking is creative. So the creativity, it doesn't stay with the creative community, let's say, but creative community, I think, in the best way that my thinking of how we use creativity as a creative is creating creative spaces to be creative.
Thank you. Iron, I mean, obviously you've been in the sort of classical theatre and you're now in the circus. So this idea of using your muscles, your creative muscles, and building them is something that's you're very familiar with. What would you like to share?
Trying to respond to these two questions. Of course, we're always challenged by the notion of patriarchy. So one of the things that is inherent to all the projects I do is that we have a lot of women artists as well. And we have many artists who have what we call in Austria a diversity background. So to create a kind of other kind of role model. So when a woman Turkish rapper goes into a classroom to work with people or goes into the prison to work with people, there are people who can relate to her and also speak to her in Turkish or others. So we have refugees also from Ukraine now giving workshops, artists who have landed in Linz as part of their journey. And we provide space for them to be not only creative, but to be on the mentoring side and not only on the so-called receiving side. That is very important. But we always run into borders. So our conversation is very idealistic because we're all really strong believers in what we do. But we have had great challenges. When we were working in schools in Brussels, there was a young girl who just wanted to sing. She was 14, but her father forbid her to sing because in his religion and tradition, a young woman should not sing in public. So it's about, I think, what Khaled was speaking about, giving voices. He really wanted to take her voice away. And so it was a lot of discussions with the school, with the father, and we convinced him to let her sing because it's a class project. But he said, the minute you leave the school to present it somewhere else, I'm taking her out of the project. So it was just a really terrible experience to understand that we are in Europe and these things are still possible because we are not a homogeneous culture that promotes the same values. And here in Linz, we have, and it's a very tragic story, and I also don't know what part we play in it. We had a class that wanted to dance, urban dance. And there was a young woman, she's also 13, 14, who was a fantastic dancer from Chechnya. I mean, she was a refugee from Chechnya. And she did an amazing solo dance, and she really grew up, and she danced with her head scarf, with her full body covered, but dancing. And then the family decided that one has to marry her off to a cousin in Chechnya because this society is not good for her. So while empowering her, we estranged her from her family, and we couldn't save her. She's gone, So, and we have to live with the fact that had we not done these dance, I mean, I think she was rebellious in her own way already and strong-minded, but we did give her a platform to present herself where patriarchy the Empire strikes back, as it was always in Star Wars, and it does strike back, and it strikes back in a way that we are kind of cannot support the people that we're actually there to support. And the second thing about how do we make sure that becomes a natural thing? For me, it's always the scope of the work that I do. I mean, the circus is a smaller project with smaller workshops, but every 1 or 2 years, I do a gigantic project with thousands of citizens. And I think that is like, if you want to transform spaces, if you want to transform thinking, and we only achieve so much, but you need to get like a critical mass and people working together that they can't imagine not to do that anymore, that they can't imagine not to be in touch anymore. So that is my attempt to create a kind of normalization. And I just wanted to add one more comment to the conversation, because we're very much focused on refugees. And what we're trying to do here is also to reach out to the citizens who are allowed to vote here, who have a voice in the voting, but are also people who need our support. And it's not only the people that come from outside. There's a growing poverty in Austria, and it's shameful for one of the richest countries in Europe to have so many people fall beneath the poverty line, and they have a voice which turns to be a very terrible political voice because of their frustration, and that they feel that that we're all only taking care of, they're getting workshops, they're getting phones, they're getting money, and not us. So I think it's really important also in the conversation to understand that our societies are really collapsing, and to get out of poverty, and learning and adult learning is a way out. But we must also in our language include these people as well, because they're insiders that feel as outsiders. Justly so or not, I don't know, but we still have to work with them and support them as well.
Thank you. You've made a fantastic bridge to a question that we've had come in, raising, some of the challenges for neurodiverse people or people with disabilities who are also or with mental health issues who are disproportionately found amongst marginalized communities. How do we lower the barriers? How do we, offer creativity, particularly within, neurodiverse families to see, because it's a completely different way of thinking. Is creativity a sort of a way forward that brings neurodiverse people back into the broader conversations? Does anyone have experience of that?
Sorry.
Aaron, go ahead. Yeah.
Sorry. Well, first of all, we work with artists who have different abilities and disabilities. We offer performances now that we call, I think they're called in English, relaxed performances, that enable a neurodiverse audience to enjoy a show, which means you make the lighting less extreme, you take away some of the noise elements, you leave a little light in the audience. But most importantly, again, not only on the receiving end, we work with people who are on the autistic scale, who are working with us as technicians or artists. We have art choreographer in wheelchair giving workshops to classes of people without wheelchairs. So empowerment only, for me, happens when you treat everybody the same and you find roles for everybody, not only on the receiving end, but also on the leading part of being part of a leading team of a production or leading workshops. I think that for me is the way, and to be as inclusive in thinking and action as possible.
Thank you. Who else might like to respond on this?
Sorry. Yeah, I've noticed with the book club, it's very simple to join, and I've got a lot of feedback from people that say that they're dyslexic and reading is very intimidating for them, and so they see the list of books that we're going to have for the session, and at first they're very intimidated, and then when they come, it's the easiest bridge for them towards either getting interested in the book, maybe listening to it as an audiobook further on, or just feeling as if they can participate in activities like this. And it was really interesting because one of the people that have come to the book club, I guess 2 years back, is soon going to publish his own book, and he is dyslexic, so he's redesigning how he's making this book, and it looks like a magazine, and it's really cool. He had to get some writers on as well to make it happen. And also I've worked with I guess people that come also on the autistic spectrum. So they feel more safe to open up, and it's really beautiful because, of course, I don't know that they're on the autistic spectrum until after the session. One of their friends come up to me and say, "Wow, my friend is actually autistic, and I've never seen her open up like this. She felt safe, and she felt like it wasn't too stimulating, because I think one of the issues that they had was there's too many stimulants, so they just ended up shutting down. And also we work with people that are on the spectrum to host, which is really nice as well. Yeah.
Thank you. Khalid, I think you earlier spoke about silence, creating moments of silence. Was that you? And we've just talked about how conversation tends to be very busy, and I'm an extrovert, so that's a very comfortable space for me to be in. But for many other people, that's not comfortable, and for people who are neurodiverse or others, can you just tell us a little bit more about this concept of creating safe space, but also silence?
Yeah, I was also reading once the relation between boredom and creativity, because the moment you get bored, this is the moment literally where you become creative. And again, if you repeat the same action, the same environment, you end up with the same results, right? And nowadays with social media, with going through so many images and reels and news, and kind of also shifting in emotion, it's even flattening a little bit our connection to ourselves. It's actually a lot, not only a little bit. And that doesn't leave room for creative thinking to happen, and sometimes exercise that I really like to do, I have a very specific corner on the house, which is a couch that I sit on, and I'm not allowed to do anything, no phone, no book, No, just me sitting there literally getting bored, because that's the moment where you clear your head, you take off all this kind of, I'm sorry, rubbish as well that's thrown on us every day. And sometimes I can't remember the amount of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of images that we go through every day. It's incredible, right? And then we can't really think of it's not even we can't. Our mind is busy. Our nervous system is completely activated to not be creative, because we are just busy to process all the information that we see and we go through. So I think this moment of silence, of being bored, is very important. First of all, to calm down, to connect to yourself, and then it's like, okay, I'm here like literally doing nothing. I need to do something to be creative. And we saw this also, for example, in prisons, also like during the last panel, you were talking about prison as well. So we saw this also, how much prisoners they become creative sometimes, because there's nothing you can do then. And for example, I know from friends as well who were present in Syria, how they collect. I don't know how to express it in English, but if you have a wool, sometimes you have this like small, I don't know what you call it, like when it's getting old, like anything that is made. So they start like collecting all the small things together, and
tiny bubbles that come from cloth.
Yeah, and they like using oil or to make it like a clay, and they start like making small sculpture, like very tiny sculpture in the presence, because you don't. And it's really amazing what they have done. Many other things as well. Also, if I look into, because I was working. One of the project, or again platform, that I was working with siege community, and was comparing the creativity that has been created during the siege in comparison to art creation, right? And I think if we take the platform that this is art and this is siege, I think the result is just exactly the same value and even more, because here one thing is the aesthetic of siege that I don't want to romanticize, and this is like being siege is being bored, because life is not the same anymore. You are plugged into your environment. There's cut sometimes of even gas and electricity. So, and seeing the outcome that is beautiful in its kind of aesthetic of the specific situation, but also it has the functionality, which sometimes art lose if it's not designed. It's only art in the abstract level. So I think boredom is very important, and this kind of silence, and just putting ourselves in a zone where we have to not do the same thing, because doing the same thing, we will wake up, we'll go to work, we'll come back, we are not doing anything else. That's what we do every day.
Thank you. We've only got a few minutes left in our conversation, but we've had a request for help from someone, and I just want to throw it open to you. It says, one of my students is a 17-year-old new arrival from Guinea, and he's very good at drawing. The problem is that he pulls out the drawing notebook as he gets into the class, and he just keeps drawing from the start to the very end of his language lesson. So have you got a suggestion on how to overcome this, but without destroying his creativity? So that's a challenge. He's in a class where he's supposed to be learning language, but the creativity is flowing. Does anyone have a practical suggestion that they could make on how to help?
Yeah, if I may, if I'm the teacher, I will maybe not push them to learn language. I will push them to practice more what they do, and maybe use their tool for learning, right? So maybe I will connect the drawings through the language, try to express with the language that they are learning what they are doing. So I connect through their interest, their scope of interest, to reach what I want to, which is teaching language in this case. But I'm using their creative energy, which apparently this person is tapped in, right? And sometimes really when you step into this zone, you live in this frequency, and I can't even express it what do I mean with that, because I know what does that feel for this person, where it becomes like your tool of communication, tool of education, tool of learning. I think in Finland they have this classes as well, or one of the methods of the education there that has been developed quite really incredibly, and many countries they are learning from these processes, where they don't enforce subjects on kids. Like now it's a language class or math class. They see what the kids want to learn now, and they group them and then they teach them based on what they want, right? So, and I think if I'm this person, I will use their language, which is art and drawing, to reach to the other tool, which is learning language.
Go ahead,
Maybe,
Eric.
I mean, I'm not in the position to make any suggestions for something like this, because being in a class is, I think, one of the most difficult things, especially nowadays. And I'm not sure the Italian school system, which I worked in, would accommodate Finnish innovative learning methodologies. But maybe it would be nice to ask everybody else to draw during the class, so the person doesn't draw alone, and learn language through drawing. So it's not something that this is an oddball doing drawing in Italian. And it seems the Italian language inspires, because it doesn't seem from the question to draw during math class or physics class, but maybe the musicality of the Italian language inspires the person to draw. But maybe it would be nice if they all draw together, or if he draws publicly and comments with drawings on the lessons and draw on the board. I mean, different games to try and involve. But this is all easy to say from the outside, because there's just too many unknowns in this question.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for rising to that. And just in our sort of the last few minutes, if we could imagine that there's a new commissioner who will be taking their job up in the next month or so, if you had a sort of 2-sentence message to them, where we have this common challenge that people who are living in poverty or in very difficult circumstances are living in survival mode from minute to the minute, there's just too much for them to handle to try and then start expecting them to be creative and do other things. That's so low down on the list of survival needs that it shouldn't be a priority for programs and initiatives that are targeting marginalized or groups or people living in poverty. So if you had 2 sentences you could say to the commissioner to make the case why creativity should be a central part of those programs, what would you say? Who would like to go first? Aaron, go ahead.
I think, first of all, more money, a lot more money for all these things, because we are at the bottom of the list with creativity. And to rethink, the European Union is a kind of utopian project. And because we lost creativity, we've lost the utopian aspect of it. It's all about numbers and economies, but to reinvent this utopian idea of being a social and cultural union, that would be the way to go, and to how to involve creativity in approaching or dealing with a lot of the challenges that we have, because we can do it. There's enough proof of it. And we're also much more economic than a lot of other projects that they have to do in order to make it happen. But I think we've lost that social cultural vision for this European dream. And if we don't find it, it will be destroyed.
Thank you. So reconnect to the European dream. And actually, you know that in the founding treaty, the Treaty of Rome, amongst the things, one of the key objectives that was written in from day one was to improve the standard of living for people and the quality of life for people living on the European continent. So it was there, as you say, it was part of the plank. Yes, they did it through the steel and coal community, but the overall objective was very clear. And there's also, and I don't know if we can ever prove it or not, but it's famously in English we say this, that Winston Churchill, at the height of the Second World War, when the UK was fighting for its survival, it was facing a potential invasion. It was questioned, should we be spending money on culture? Should we be investing in theatre? Surely we're in the war economy. And he turned around and said, absolutely, we should do it, because if not, what are we fighting for? He was very clear that even at the moments of existential threat, there was a role for culture, for theatre, for art. So anyone else like to share a final word? Jana?
You actually took my my quote.
Sorry.
But I will just continue with Aaron's thought that European Union has to be a bit more ambitious in implementing its initial goals. And, the motto of the European Union, united in diversity, right? For the past few years or maybe decades, this diversity has been narrowed down very much. We're only thinking about the hardcore Europeans, people who were born and lived for generations in the European Union, in member states. We're not thinking that much of those new Europeans, people who are coming now and have so much to offer. And we have to be more creative in integrating them and making them true Europeans. And I feel like, as a person who used to work for the European Parliament, I think that this element is not present at all. We're going a very different direction right now. We're thinking how to push people away, push people back. And this is the core of policies. This is where the money goes. We're not thinking that those new Europeans have so much to offer, so much to offer. There's this gigantic human creative potential to be used to the benefit of the European Union.
Thank you. Khalid, final words.
Final words to the people and the creativity, or to the organizers and
Any ones you'd like to make?
yeah,
This is your final role at the microphone, so go for it.
Yeah, no, I just want to say, I think now witnessing where Europe is going in general, turning to the far right, or yeah, it's very, very alarming, I think, and it should be really alarming, not only for us, but alarming for the people themselves. Also witnessing like what's happening in many, many parts of the world, where wars is taking place and genocide is taking place. I think it's very, very important. If we lose this dream, if we lose the ethics, if we lose the morality of what we are doing, I think it will just go to the opposite direction and will go to really, really dark time. So the whole idea, we need to, and especially with the EU, especially with the EU as a project, because I think one of the last kind of utopian project, if we don't defend it, I think it, and if it collapses, I don't really know what is left to defend. And I think this idea of pushing people away instead of including them, it can turn us all into like a dark hole. So I think I don't know. I'm very conflicted, to be honest, a little bit with what's happening nowadays in Europe, also in Germany, and obviously in our region, in Palestine, in Lebanon, in Syria, and the whole region, where I feel like if we don't wake up again, if we don't have the same maybe dream that people start dreaming of 20, 30 years ago, where we fight for ethics and morality, not for benefits, I think we can go to a dark time. So I think all what we are trying to do with the creativity, with inclusion, with art and culture is extremely essential.
Thank you. Kritikos.
Yes, to answer the question in two sentences, it would be the world is changing, especially Europe is changing, and it's nonsensical to keep the education systems and the way we engage with our communities the same way. We need to also change and move forward with the same way the world is changing. I remember when I was younger, we used to have to learn how to write letters in English class or in French class as well. And I would get in arguments with the teacher, or at least just a back and forth, because I'd say like we're getting more on our computers, our phones are becoming more smart. We don't need to learn how to write letters. We need to learn how to write emails at this point. And this is in secondary school. Of course, now I think they're teaching that in schools. But with that mindset, we need to really figure out how to teach the youth to engage with the world that's around them, rather than hold on to these traditional things just in the name of holding on to something that's traditional.
Excellent. So, on behalf of our audiences watching across all the different platforms, I just want to say a fantastic warm thank you to Khalid, to Sonia, to Aaron, and to Kritikos for helping us in this past hour discover and explore the power of curiosity. Thank you for joining us and being part of our panel today. So, let me wrap up. We started today by exploring the sense of time. And we heard from our keynote speaker how in order to free ourselves from the tyranny of time, pressure, and constraints, we need to create protected spaces of deceleration that allow us to have a reflection on the past and plan for the future, and that this is one of the key emancipation parts of learning. We heard from our different EPALE experts and projects, whether they're working in prisons with ex-drug users, ex-offenders, whether they are trying something new, the power of imagination, but use accompanying people, meeting them where they are, listening to them, using a flat power dynamic and making sure that it is a true co-creation for the learning to work. And on our last panel, we learned about the joy of fun, of playfulness, the importance of being able to fail, to imagine and to be open to things, and to recognize that, everyone has an artistic skill, and to allow that life changing to happen. So we've had a really wonderful discussion today, looking around at our theme, which is the theme for our middle day, which was adult learning as a way out of poverty and towards more educational opportunities for life. We have our third and final day tomorrow, which will be all about sustainability. And we will be challenging you to think differently and to do things differently. So join us promptly at 9:30. I'm going to remind you again about the survey. Got 150,000 users and growing, and we want to know what works for you, what doesn't work for you, what do you want more of? We heard a couple of comments today saying, please, next year, let's do more creativity. Well, we've got questions about the conference, the annual conference, in the survey. Should only take you 5 minutes to do, but we'd love to hear from you. Thank you very much for joining me. I have so enjoyed today. I'm really looking forward to tomorrow. Thank you, and see you tomorrow at 9:30. Goodbye from Brussels.